quite exciting for me. Kaan Kerman is the Department of Psychology. He's got a doctorate in Bilkent University in Ankara, Turkey. Isn't it crazy, Kaan? I'm in Vermont, USA, and you're in Ankara, Turkey. And we're just like, hi, how are you doing? Tell me a little about your research about cats meowing. We take a
I
little bit
totally,
for granted, right?
I totally agree with you, Tracy. It's a wonderful thing. There are kinds of stuff that might not be conducive to human interactions when it comes to technology, but this is one of the good things about technology.
That's a
Exactly.
great point. Yeah, with all the kids staring at a phone instead of staring at each other, we're lucky
Yeah,
we can stare at each other and everybody can stare at us. But also, listen, many
yeah,
people just listen, which is great. So
yeah.
here's how I came to know of you. Also, thanks to technology, I could just poke your name into the Google search bar and there you were. So you got
Yeah.
a lot of international attention for a study you did recently, and the lay press, meaning the non-academics, the non-people with letters after their names, or maybe different letters after their names, those people were like, wait a minute, that sounds doesn't sound like the kind of study we're used to hearing about. But I think the lay public, people who own cats and or dogs, were just delighted to learn what you found. So tell a little bit about the study you did because the New York Times said cats meow more to men than women. It's what? So you did a study and you have a doctorate, so you know how to do studies, right? So how did you come
Yeah.
up with this idea?
Okay, so this is how we decided to conduct this study. I'm actually a latecomer to cat research. So I've been studying animal behavior for the last 15 years or so. I studied birds, I studied insects. So
Oh,
everything changed when I actually decided to adopt a cat. It was due to my wife's interest, so we should adopt a cat. I'm like, why not? I'm an animal behaviorist. So I would be delighted to have a companion with us, right? So what I've noticed is that my expertise on wild animals don't really translate that well to pet animals, especially cats, right? So I've had all kinds of sort of question marks popping out in my head, and then realized that maybe I should go ahead and look at the literature to see what people say about this particular behavior. And to my surprise, that although people have been working on those kinds of questions for decades now, we don't really have a good answer. And what I realized, again, this is something that we already know in the scientific community that's interested in feline behavior, is that it's notoriously difficult to study cats in a captive environment, right?
yes,
In a lab environment. Captive meaning in the lab, in a laboratory
right.
setting, right? So we usually rely on things such as feral cats and cat colonies and how cats interact with one another. What are the things that they do to socialize with one another? And a few studies that's been done that was done in the mid 20th century, lab cats and people raising cats in a laboratory environment, but it's not like the kind of cat setting that we're used to as cat owners, like in
Right.
a domestic environment, how we socialize with them. We adopt them at a very early age, and sometimes senior cats too. But this is notoriously difficult. There has been some progress in the last decade or so with people asking or recruiting the help of all the cat owners out there, right? Citizen science. And this
Right.
is what we wanted to do. And we wanted to focus particularly on the breeding behavior. So many of the things that are done in terms of cat socialization, cat human socialization, rests upon the questionnaires and surveys sent to the scientists by cat owners. So essentially, we're asking cat owners like, what are the kinds of things that you want to report about your cat, how you socialize with them, what are the problematic behaviors that they exhibit? But it's all about questionnaires and surveys, and it's not because of research as well. It's just difficult to get access
Right.
to cats' behaviors at home with all the ethical issues to get the permits and whatnot, and also technological difficulties, especially in the 20th century. Not everyone had a camera that they could just
Right.
carry around and video record. So this is what we wanted to do. So let's go ahead and just start with a sort of with this very simple question, like what do they do when they meet humans, right? They're caregivers. So
Right.
we asked the participants to send us video recordings of their cats as soon as they enter their homes. They had to wear body cams, and it's not something complicated. It's their cell phones nowadays. Every cell phone has an excellent camera, and people actually record movies just by
Yes.
using their cell phone. So it's not very complicated. So we just asked them to standardize that and just act naturally when they were interacting with their cats. And then they send us those videos. We had to remove some of those participants' videos because it didn't really include the things that we wanted to see. So the number reduced down to 31 participants and their interactions with their cats. And we decided to measure 22 greeting related behaviors that we discovered after our literature review. And these include things such as very basic stuff: tail up posture. All the cat owners will know what I mean by
Right.
that. Scratching, stretching, self-licking behavior, elbow rubbing, which is face or body
Yeah.
rubbing, side rubbing of cats, and also other kinds of movement patterns, such as the movement towards their food cup, movement towards their owners, away from their owners, those kinds of things, play behavior as well. In addition to that, we also asked the participants to provide us with some demographic variables about their cats, such as their age, sex, breed type, acquisition type, whether they were adopted or purchased from somewhere, and also the number of cats in the household. But at the same time, we also asked the participants to provide some information about themselves, such as their sex and age. So this was what we did, essentially. That's the setup for the study.
That's actually a really good setup, because what I read about in the lay press was it seems like cats greet with a meow men more than women. I'm like, what? How do you balance out how many of these owners were male and how many were female and how many was the male or the female, the secondary owner as opposed to the primary owner? But what you're describing is really good science. You know that because you've been studying animals in the wild for 50 years. You don't stay at a university if you're doing sloppy work. Let's be honest. So you looked at the data, and from that, you drew a conclusion. You didn't go in with something you wanted to see or prove. You simply wanted to see what's going on with cats and their people
Sure.
when they
Yeah,
first see each other, when they've been separated for some period of time. So
sure.
you are male, your wife is female, I'm
Yeah,
presuming.
yeah,
Actually, nowadays, that's not a presumption. So if
yeah,
that's the
yeah,
case,
yeah.
and you both adopted the cat together, did you at any point during looking at the data of the other cat owners think, you know what? That cat of ours definitely talks to me more than my wife? Was that,
Yeah.
did that happen in your case?
That's really an interesting question. So, what we ended up doing is that we decided to observe our cats meticulously. So, what I usually do is I do all kinds of pilot studies with my own cat to see if it works, right? So, and I had to credit my cat too. I forgot to do that in the acknowledgement section, but from this point on, I will definitely do it. But what we realized is that my cat vocalizes more when it's food related stuff towards my wife. So she definitely receives more meows when it comes to that. But when it's about greeting, I think definitely it's going to be me. As soon as I enter the home, it's always going to be me meowing more. Like I receive more meows compared to my wife's sort of reception. So this is interesting. And that actually tells us something that we already knew, like vocalizations are complex. Cat vocalizations are complex. They are context specific. So we have to be extra careful. So people, as you mentioned already, made all kinds of assumptions about just in general, men don't listen and women pay attention to stuff.
Right.
So it all depends on what cats are trying to get from. So what we assume is more about the socialization part. Maybe that's why, like, that's where they realize that they need a little bit of prompting to do to get the same kind of attention that they used to get from the female owners. So
That's
yeah,
interesting.
that's the
But of course,
interesting part.
there's a couple of other things. One thing is from everything that I've read in the literature is that cats only, almost exclusively, only meow to humans. They only use that for a feline human interaction. They don't do it to other cats. They don't do it to a bird in a tree. They might
Mm-hmm.
do it to their mom, or their mom might do it to them when they're tiny kits, but otherwise, that's exclusively an intercat human of communication. So that's interesting in itself. The
Sure.
other
Yeah.
thing, if I wanted to be picky, is to say, all right, so when you come home into the house, is there nobody else there? Has the cat been totally alone and for how long? When your wife comes into the house, is that also exactly the same? In other words, is there,
Mhm.
or did you come home 15 minutes before so the cat's all meowed out? I'm good. Dad's
Yeah.
here. So
Yeah.
did
Yeah.
you think about that as well? in terms of
Yeah,
context?
that's a good point. That's a good point. So this is one of the things that we had to actually just trust what the owners, the participants
Right,
essentially telling us. So what we wanted them to be away from home for some time. And many of the participants were either students or people who have jobs. They just leave home at 9 and coming back home together with their significant others in some cases. And this is seen in some of the videos. But the thing about that is, obviously, we cannot control what exactly happened right before they
right,
leave. One thing that we can exclude fairly confidently is the amount of fooding that's going on at homes. This is probably something cultural, but we don't really do strict dietary regimes to cats. They just have access to food ad libitum, like whenever,
right.
like it's always available. So it's nothing that we do to cats in Turkey. It's just like they always have access to food. We don't necessarily give them food. Obviously, my wife does provide some extra stuff that he might like, my cat might like, but it's not like they, oh, it's time. I have to receive the food, or my owner is back, and then I have to meow. Like they always have the food available at home. That's one thing that we didn't necessarily control that in a strict fashion, but that's something that I can say that we can more or less exclude as a potential confounding variable. But the other one is, yeah, so we just have to trust the owners when they say that, yeah, we were definitely away for some time. There's no one else at home. So, yeah.
Good. I mean, that was obviously a control. Now,
Yeah.
let's mention how cats are fed in Turkey. Everybody listening to this show by now has seen the extraordinary documentary Kedi. Because of the documentary about the cats in Istanbul, I started
Yeah.
the New York Cat Film Festival because my sponsor of Cat Chat, Dr. Elsie, said to me, "You have a dog film festival. Why not a cat film festival?" We saw a movie called Kedi. I said, "I saw it too. That's like the best cat movie ever made." And so I doubt there's any more. Now we're in the ninth year of the Cat Film Festival. So
Oh,
thank you
perfect.
to the
Yeah.
cats of Turkey for inspiring the New York Cat Film Festival. But Kedi gives a very strong picture of either just Istanbul or perhaps Turkey in general as being so cat friendly, so cat welcoming that these cats are throughout a town, throughout a village. Is that in fact the case?
That is, in fact, the case. Yeah.
Wow.
We have some mixed sort of feelings towards stray dogs. So there is definitely some politically charged discussion about what to do with stray dogs, but nothing like that when it comes to cats. Like they just wander around everywhere. They just have places in school, at home, in public places, and even in corporate buildings. They're just everywhere. So nobody touches them. Nobody, in
They
most
do
cases,
feed them. Sometimes they stroke them. They do touch them in terms of affection. You see them in a cafe, in a shop,
yeah,
and they're
yeah.
just part of the landscape, like the air you breathe.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a very common feature. It's usually like cats, people with strong religious views tend to focus the cleanliness of places such as mosques, but cats are welcomed in there. So they can do whatever they want in mosques too. So,
It's
you know,
really
that
quite extraordinary. Just as an aside, I'm remembering that in the Dog Film Festival, a Turkish filmmaker sent in a film that for me is one of the most searingly beautiful and disturbing sad ones that I've ever received. It was about the stray dogs. These Anatolian shepherds. These are some of the most beautiful dogs I've ever seen, and they are in packs outside of cities, or at least in the case of this city. And a man collected old bread and sometimes dog kibble, and he would drive his little van. It was a very silent movie, up into these hills where there would be dozens of these dogs, unbelievably friendly, so human friendly, so friendly to each other. And they were all ostracized from the town. Curious thing in societies, which ones view dogs as to be protected, to be taken in, vaccinated, health checked out, or where free roaming animals are welcome to be free roaming. We have free roaming dogs in India, millions of them,
yeah,
millions.
yeah,
And I've rarely seen a cat in India
yeah.
now. And isn't that a curiosity? Because
I
There's
agree. Yeah.
very different cultures, and humans are very curious how we've evolved alongside some species and not others, and are viewed as forbidden, and yet
Mhm.
there they are in a mosque, which is
Yeah,
a place where people have to wash their feet and stuff to even go.
exactly.
Very
Yeah.
interesting. We are interesting, we humans. Since you're in the Department of Psychology, it'll be
Yeah.
great when you come up with a study of humans and which kind of animals work for them. I'm going to, off the air, we're going to talk about your other work over the last 15 years with birds and other species. I would love to have you come back and talk about
Oh,
that. Anyone who loves the natural world is someone who, to be treasured and to be thanked for your attention to them. Because the more we draw attention to the other creatures, the better creatures we become, I think. Thank you so much, Kaan. You've done wonderful work and you've just brought a wonderful conversation to people. Even if all they do is say, "What do you mean the cat meows more to you?" Wait a minute, let me see. It just it makes people interact more with their cats, and that's a good thing. Continue
yeah, yeah.
your good work, enjoy your
Thank
cat,
you.
and come up with wonderful new ideas. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on your show. It was a pleasure. Definitely.
And for all of us as well. Take care.